This week, we're taking a little bit of a departure. In my quest to turn back the clock, I've had to radically change my whole lifestyle. Some aspects of my lifestyle have been pretty easy to reprogram, but with others, like exercising consistently, finding the motivation has sometimes been a real struggle. So today, I thought I'd share what I've learned about finding the motivation to stay on track. Motivation is the topic of some of the very first videos that I ever made. As a result, they weren't as good as they could have been. So I've decided to take that information and put it in a couple of new videos. And this is the first. The second will be in a few weeks. If you want to live a radically longer and healthier life, you're going to have to radically change your lifestyle. And sometimes that can be hard to do. You're going to have to make some changes. When I began this quest to turn back the clock, I knew that I'd have to change some things up. And as it turns out, there were even more than I knew at the time. And some of them have turned out to be much more difficult to achieve than others. Like exercise. I think that I'm like a lot of people when I admit that I don't like to exercise. I've always known that exercising came with a lot of benefits, and God knows I've tried down through the years, but I've never been able to stick with it. Just once, I stuck it out for 6 months. Other than that one time, 3 months is the longest that I've ever been able to keep at it. I'd always give up. I'd always just quit. So I knew that not only was I going to have to make some changes, I also knew that these changes needed to be permanent. I needed to keep up this new lifestyle for the rest of my life, rather than quit after a few months. And the key to being able to permanently achieve these changes to my lifestyle is motivation. I need to find the motivation to be able to stick with these changes for a long time. Because here's the simple truth. If you can just keep at something long enough, you'll eventually succeed at anything. That means that there's only one thing that you cannot ever do, and that's quit. But here's the thing. Quitting is passive rather than active. Quitting isn't something that you do. Quitting is something that you stop doing. So not quitting means that you have to continue doing what you're doing. And that takes motivation. In order to continue doing something that you've already been doing for a while, that's maybe gotten boring or even painful, when you don't think that you're getting out of it what you're putting in. Motivation is what keeps you going. Motivation is what drives you to continue putting in the effort. And that's what this video is all about. Now, I've stayed on this path for about 3.5 years. That's a little bit better than the typical 3 months that I used to be able to stick with a program. But in order to get here, I had to learn a little about motivation. I had to learn about actions that I needed to take that were beyond the simple changes that I wanted to make to my lifestyle. Learning what those actions were and how to implement them were what enabled me to permanently make the changes that I wanted to make. And I'd like to share that knowledge with you. Now, this knowledge that I think I've acquired is really just my opinion. It's what I've done, and it's worked for me. But I don't know that it'll work for anybody else. And I don't know to what degree it coincides with research on motivation that's been done by people a lot smarter and with a lot more education on the subject than me. Now, I have done some research on motivation, and while that's definitely influenced my opinions, a lot of this is just going to be my own philosophy. With that said, let's dive in. I feel like motivation can be broken down into a few separate topics. And for me, those topics are goals, setbacks, willpower versus habits, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, self-efficacy, and tracking your progress. And the first of these that we're going to tackle is goals. Now, we all know that there are short-term goals and long-term goals. But one of the things that I've learned about goals is that long-term goals shouldn't just be a longer version of your short-term goals. Think of it like this. What's something big that you want to accomplish? Something that's whole and complete in itself. It's not something that's on the path to something else. That's your long-term goal. Now, what are all the steps that you have to accomplish in order to achieve that? Each of those steps is a short-term goal. Now, that's pretty simple, right? Now, a lot of those short-term goals will be repetitive. For example, one of my short-term goals was to do a session of high-intensity interval training 3 times a week, every week. I was trying to lose weight, build my endurance, and improve my fitness levels, and doing regular, consistent sessions of HIIT as a form of cardio was key. But I also had another short-term goal, and that was to turn doing a session of HIIT 3 times a week into a habit. Because if I could do that, it would make the goal of actually doing 3 sessions of HIIT a week a lot easier to achieve. Now, I'll talk more about habits in the next video on motivation. Now, here's something else I've learned about goals. While achieving your long-term goals is critical, something that you have to do no matter how long it takes, your short-term goals are more plastic. They may change more frequently over a short period of time than your long-term goals. And you just have to accept that you're not always going to make those short-term goals. When I was first starting out, my record at attaining the goals of 3 sessions of HIIT per week was actually pretty dismal. Sometimes I'd only get in 2 HIIT workouts, or sometimes just 1, or maybe I wouldn't do any, which meant that I had to take some of the pressure off of the goal of doing 3 HIIT workouts a week. I couldn't let not achieving that short-term goal get me down, which sounds counterproductive, right? How can you achieve anything if you make not achieving it okay? It's all about setbacks and realizing that setbacks are just part of the process. Remember when I said that if you keep at something long enough, you'll succeed? You just have to not quit? Well, one of the biggest things that will kill your motivation and cause you to quit is setbacks. It's not accomplishing the things that you set out to accomplish. Now, a setback can be anything. It could be a missed workout. It could be not achieving a weight loss goal. It could be a disappointing test result or measurement. So I discovered a couple things about setbacks. First off, they tend to happen a lot when I listen to this little discouraging voice in my head. The second thing that I learned is that once a setback had occurred, my motivation would tank. So let's talk about that little voice first. It's always there, telling me that I just don't have the discipline to accomplish this, that I don't have the willpower, that this is going to be a lot harder than I thought, that I'll never be able to attain this goal, and I should just give up now and not even bother putting all that effort into it. I should just quit. I've discovered that a lot of the setbacks happen when I listen to that voice, and it never goes away. It's always there, always telling me to quit. After 3.5 years, it's still there, telling me that I don't have to work out today. If I've already started working out, but it's hard and I'm not really enjoying it, which is most of the time, that voice is still there. It's telling me that it's okay if I don't do the full workout, that I can quit anytime. So rather than trying to silence that voice, which I don't seem to be able to do, I've decided to ignore it, to just not listen to it. And after 3.5 years of trying to turn not listening to that voice into a habit, I've made pretty good progress. It used to be something that I would not only listen to, but also obey. Now, it's just background noise. But when I was first starting out, I'd listen to that voice a lot, and I tended to have a lot of setbacks. I had a goal that I wanted to achieve, and I had a plan to get there, but I wasn't sticking to that plan, and I wasn't achieving that goal, and so I'd suffer a setback. But rather than quit, I decided to just keep on trying until I was able to stick to the program, to continue to make the effort, to keep on doing what I was doing, and to continually try to do it a little bit better. To not quit in spite of the setbacks. They're just a part of the process, and they always will be. I now realize that I'll always have setbacks, but here's the thing. The longer I stick with the program, the less frequently I encounter a setback. They'll never go away completely, but they will become increasingly rare. If you track your progress with a goal, it's never going to be a straight line. It'll be a series of peaks and valleys. Sometimes you make progress, and sometimes you won't. And those low points will be your setbacks. You can't beat yourself up over them. You have to keep forging ahead, not looking back, but rather looking ahead to the next little bit of progress. Never give up. If you stumble and fall, don't worry about it. Just pick it up the next day. Keep going. And that's what I meant earlier when I said that you should make it okay if you don't achieve a short-term goal. You have to find a balance between caring enough about your goals that you stay on track, but not so much that having a setback will tank your motivation. Hope that you enjoyed this video on motivation and that you'll tune in to my next video on this same subject. And if you'd like to learn more about longevity and aging, check out this series on the hallmarks of aging. That's it for me. I'm out of here.